So we're exploring the production process of the consumer, the way how that we're given, not as people, but as interchangeable economic units where we are credited a limitation of agency. We can only demand, we can't command. And so when we understand the consumer is not reducible to the agency that we're credited, but rather a claim that we acquit ourselves of, that claim is a claim of the totalizing claim of a buyer's journey. Like we cannot live life beyond a buyer's journey. So if we're going to look at the question of our production process, we have to look at the nature of that claim that we acquit ourselves of, that we are not cognizant of. And this will orientate our questioning in a way where we can understand what is the principal trade that we engage with, that is, makes all forms of commerce subordinate to this one thing. Because we have to think that if we are the principal product, we are given, but we don't question, then the way how things are given is in reference to the product that we are. That sanctions our commerce. So all our economic activity is subordinate to the principal trade that we engage in when we produce ourselves as a consumer. And so we have to look at that the economy is not external to ourselves, the economy is internalized. You are economizing. So we can say that claim we have to explore is that if we're economizing, what is it that we're economizing? And is when through our presupposition of economizing action are essentially we are acquitting ourselves of a truth claim when we are orientated to what we see is fit for our lives, as it were. And so in that way, the claim that we acquit ourselves of, it will be implicated. We will implicate ourselves. We will be the co-conspirators, and it won't be externalized because you're dealing with something that you do to yourself. Now, why is that important? And why is the question of our production important? For that simple fact alone, because if you are aware of the way how you produce yourself as a consumer, then you become aware of the significance of your actions and where your loyalty lies. Is life a buyer's journey or isn't? Is there a totalizing claim? Are we beholden to existential totalitarianism? And if we are, then the nature of the problems that we see in the world are symptoms of it. So if we don't diagnose the core, the root cause of this issue, then we're going to get beholden to those narratives that are sold in when we don't give due consideration to this one singular question. And so what we've got to look at is the nature of the claim that we acquit ourselves of. So the claim is that time is of value. Now, this will seem counterintuitive because we live our lives with an intentionality where we economize our time. We presuppose that our time is valuable, and so therefore we have this opportunity cost of our actions in reference to it. The division of labour, capital equipment, capital formation is all predicated upon removing the opportunity cost, and so therefore the provisioning period is lessened, so therefore we can actualize our demand rather than go through the whole rigmarole of obviously trying to secure stuff for ourselves through us having to do anything. That is cooperation in a nutshell. All right, so to say that, to question the nature of the truth claim that time is of value is counterintuitive because we know that we value our own time. And so this is the issue here. But then if we are orientated towards our own time and we economize it independent, let's say, of all other considerations, but then you work back that we are economizing our time, but is the time that we economize used for something that's transcendent to the purpose that we are otherwise sold on? And this is the key distinction, because when you're looking at the totalizing claim of a buyer's journey, and if you get sold on time as a value, that your time is valuable, then you're going to think value is associated with obviously an input to produce something, we could say. And if it's used to produce, well, it's not to produce your life as you like to think. It's not used, all right, as a means. It might be in the sense that I sell my labor, let's say, and so I secure money. But once again, that just only validates the issue that there's a totalizing claim of life when given as a buyer's journey. So if your time is valuable, but it's invaluable to what you presuppose, and yet the consumer is always transcendent to the purpose that you otherwise would sell yourself on, then time given as a value is ultimately the input is the means of our production as a consumer. And this is where the cognitive dissonance becomes acute, because we don't understand that the way how we produce ourselves through acquitting ourselves of a claim made on time is done through our labour. So at the moment, there's this false dichotomy between labour and, say, capital. If you're looking at traditional kind of, critiques of capitalism in inverted commas, but when you're looking at it when you're grounding it in an existential, you're looking at people, and you're looking at a truth claim. Well, a truth claim that time is of value is exceeds our understanding of capital, equipment, and labour. And so Marxism, let's say, and because it drills it down into the existential of the nature of time itself, and whether or not that claim that we acquit ourselves of, so something that is true, let's say from the individual perspective of the person, is still true for something that is transcendent. And so therefore what we do is we perpetuate a system where we are going to produce ourselves as a product that we're given as, but when we have the cognitive dissonance to feel that we are people, but we discount the production of ourselves through the way how that we're always communicated to in our whole entire lives, where there's a disavowed responsibility or ownership of creativity that we create the world, because if there's a disconnect, then how can you can externalize. What you do is you get stalled on externalizing issues because you don't know the production process occurs through your own life. Why? Because if a person was to propose to you that time is not of value, then there is the major disconnect between what we know to be true, our actual lives, and how that is substantiated all the time, and then yet what is transcendent to the purpose that we sell ourselves on otherwise. And yet that is still true for both, but then one is transcendent to the other. So if your time is valuable in reference to your life, and your life is given as a buyer's journey, it's also true. And that means to say a buyer's journey relates to you being a consumer, but a customer for all the different things that you buy. Well, obviously it's true for the consumer that is always transcendent to the customer. A business has a customer first orientation because it's sold on the consumer first. The production of the consumer is produced prior to the customer. All right, so we have to think of that. You can only orientate a business towards whatever it does if the principal product of the civilization, which is the consumer, is what they call the pan-cultural invariant. It is transcendent to the way how you sell yourself on yourself otherwise. All right, so you're not a person, you're always a consumer that you're given as. You're only credited, and you only credit yourself. This is the thing. What happens is that it works, you get sold on the story without knowing the way how that you produce yourself. So if time is the claim that we acquit ourselves of, that means to say that there's a totalizing claim on time, and that we cannot choose to accept time any other way than the economic good that it is. Now you have to think that through. What does that mean? So if time is given it as a value, well, it's a truth claim, and it has no grounds in reality other than the belief that sustains it. Okay, so then this is the key distinction when you're looking at cognitive dissonance, is that we presuppose that to be true, but it's only true as much as that the belief that actually gives it support. So the belief, so you have to look at, well, why would we believe that? We believe it because it's true, or is it true because we believe it? So once again, it's like, can we trace something beyond the way how that we accept it as a given, and to understand whether or not actually the truth of the claim is legitimate and not based upon ultimately a religiosity. So that's the thing that we need to explore. We need to explore, well, okay, if time is, if we acquit ourselves of a truth claim, and that what everybody would accept as being true, but is actually just a belief that makes it true, well, what's the nature of that belief? Can we trace the nature of the belief that it precedes, say, the truth claim that we just accept as a given? All right, so why is that important? Well, you've got to work back once again. So if if we are accepting the truth claim that time is of value, and it's all interwoven with the agency that we're credited as a consumer, you can only demand. Okay, so a consumer can only demand, that's what you're credited. That means to say that you are not crediting yourself with creativity, that you create the world. So what you've done is that you, through accepting time as a value, you externalize the world as essentially a given, and this is what we need to explore. And as a result of accepting it as a given, you limit your agency to a circumscribed domain, which is the domain of your wants or your interests. You're an economic agent in that case. An economic agent is not credited creativity, but is credited demand. You're the principal product that business is sold on in order to have a customer first orientation, as I said. So in the nature of that difference is that, well, why would we think that we don't create the world? All right, that is a religious thinking that predates the imposition of the totalizing claim on when time is given as a value. Okay, so once again we work back. Well, why would I think that the world is given, and that I'm not a co-creator of the world, and so therefore, and I'm only orientated through interest that leads, and this world is just kind of fallen from heaven, as it were. And it's just miraculously appears, and we don't think that actually our actions, our everydayness, creates the world constantly. Because when you're subjected to existential totalitarianism and existential propaganda, which is marketing, branding, and all the ways that we're communicated to, is to disregard the question of the production process. Well, then ultimately it's just reinforcing a frame of reference, and so your frame of reference relates to the way how you envisage life. Now, this is religious, all right? Because what it is that if your ideal of a good life is circumscribed to what you can do as far as your private idol, as it were, well, what does that mean? That means to say that you are seeking to monetize the value of your time to ensure that you have the means at your disposal to actualize, say, the envisaging that you set in train when you're picturing your life, the life that you want to live, the lifestyle obsession. And so as a result of that, your frame of reference gets telescoped and narrowed down, and whereby you are managing what you can control, because you're externalizing the world, because you presuppose time as a value, you disregard the totalizing claim that's made on it when time is the input of your production as a consumer. You don't actually consider that, or you disregard it, or it gets discounted. Why? Because life's given as a buyer's journey, and you're orientated towards life in no other way other than a buyer's journey. So how can you possibly think outside the envisaging required in order for you to be sold on life, for you not to question the production process, which occurs every single day of your existence? So when this occurs, you are introducing a usurping principle into life, because there's a disavow responsibility. If you feel that you can only demand and you're not commanding, then obviously through absolving yourself of responsibility, you're giving it over to somebody else. So it gets externalized. And then those people, let's say, become agents of obviously what you externalize. And so what you do is that you project your irresponsibility onto other people and say that they're responsible for the way how the world is, because you don't take responsibility, because you never ask yourself that singular question. And so this is telling in ways that we will not recognize when we're trying to explore the nature of what essentially, when time is given as a value, is a spiritual disease, because it's supported nothing else by the truth that we presuppose it is, or the belief that sustains it as true. And so that means to say that our way of life is religious to its core, because we think it, and then we have to think, okay, is our life, when life is given as a buyer's journey, is it an expiation rite or initiatory rite? Is it orientated towards genesis, renewal, flourishing, openness, or is it actually an inversion on life? And so therefore it's about removing, subtracting, reducing, diminishing life. And people will never think that life, when life is given as a buyer's journey, is about a reduction or a diminishing of life. But if it's a totalizing claim and you externalize through the use of a credit you are not the originator of, the apparatus of capture uses your disavowed responsibility and uses it against you because it can support people that nourish themselves on the spiritual disease. So a parasite is only as good as the spiritual disease that people allow. And so what we'll do is we'll explore the nature of the expiation and initiatory rite in the next episode to detail that out more.